please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
The countdown to Budget 2018 has begun, and like every other industry, the real estate and housing sector is also hoping to get some big announcements on February 1st. Hello and welcome everyone, I'm Manisha Natarajan, and today on Urban Reality, we'll take a look at the biggest problem staring at the industry today, the lack of demand in the housing sector. And we will narrow down on what can the FM or Finance Minister do to bring the buyers back and spur demand for flats and apartments across the country, which according to a Knight Frank report has hit a decade low. Remember, in the last union budget, there was a big focus on addressing the supply side and making sure there's enough stock of affordable and right price choices for buyers. But the demand punch is still missing. Joining me on the show today, Sudhir Pai, CEO of MagicBricks.com. Also with me, Anush Puri, Chairman, Anarok Property Consultants, and Srinivasan Gopalan, CEO of Ozone Group. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. I'm going to first question to you, Sudhir. Let's address the big problem of bringing the buyer back. I mean, 2017 was a year full of punches, right? Demon, RERA, GST, 2018, but that's behind us. So why is it taking so long for the new normal to return?
So, Manisha, first of all, our data suggests that buyers are already back in the market, right? They may not be transacting.
So we might as well close the discussion and debate and say, okay, we don't need anything from the finance minister.
No, I would imagine they aren't transacting as much as we'd like them to. But in terms of renewed interest back in real estate or the number of property seekers who are out there in the market, they are definitely back. So if you see data from our site, we are seeing something like a 60% jump in the number of people seeking property at this point of time versus same period last year.
Okay.
And if you cut that by city, it's anything between a 30% in a city which is not doing too well to a number which is about 65% in Hyderabad, which is the top performing city. So I would imagine the buyers are definitely back. They are searching more actively than they have been over the last 1 year. But I think the concern is they aren't transacting. So the number of deals which are getting cut or the number of properties that they're buying are still not as much. So they're taking much longer than they were
to take the decision
to buy a house.
All right. So they're in a search mode, which is also good to know, isn't it, Anuj? Because they almost disappeared. All of 2017, the buyers had just decided to sit at home and say, let the dramas play out. I'm not going to go out there and buy. They seem to be now at least back in the market hunting out for deals. What will it take for them to, get into the transaction mode, rather, using that terminology?
It is true, Manisha, that there are more number of inquiries than what we had seen in the first quarter of 2017. So it is true that there are more prospects out in the market. Clearly, the prospects are not yet transacting in the same volume as what they were transacting perhaps in 2012 or 13. I think there are a number of things that need to be done to really push these prospects who are now out in the market to transact. I think several of them are related with the finance minister, and we are looking up to the finance minister to bring some closure to those aspects, and some of them are market related. So very quickly, 2 or 3, as you started asking what the finance minister has asked maybe to bring back this demand into the market. First is clearly the GST. When we are transacting these deals, Manisha, we're finding that the GST at 12% is becoming a big bummer. In cities like Mumbai, Delhi or Bangalore, where there are more expensive properties, 12% is like a huge amount. Even if you do the offset, the net impact of GST is significant from where the previous taxation was. So that has really started to hurt, which means that the buyers are saying, well, we may actually buy once the property is completed because then GST is exempt. I mean, that is quite a dichotomy because then under construction doesn't sell at all. The second is clearly on the affordable housing, the way it has been defined, 30 square meters and 60 square meters in tier 1 and tier 2 respectively. I think that definition really needs to get enlarged. It needs to go up to at least 90 square meters in tier 1 and perhaps 150 square meters in tier 2. Otherwise, we're just finding that whilst there is now building up of 30 square meters and 60 square meter apartment, we're starting to see the demand starting to slow down even on that one. which is interesting, data point that we are receiving, because people are just saying 30 square meters may be too cramped for us. And if it does not fall into affordable housing, then fiscal and financial benefits don't come to both the buyer and to the developer. The third is somewhere the home loans, need to really come down. Somewhere there has to be more financial benefits that the government will need to give it to the home buyer. I'll just end it here. That's the ask from the finance ministry, and then through your show we will come back perhaps what the market needs for the demand to be pushed.
All right. Okay. So very quickly then, GST. Let's focus on that. We did last time as well. Srini, my question to the developers is, the day the rates came out 12%, and for the longest time, the entire developer community, both the big bodies, CREDAI and Naredco, said with land abatement, this is actually tax neutral to us, and we welcome the 12% rate. What has happened? Why has, now the conversation completely changed, and we are back demanding a cut in GST from the finance minister? What happened?
Because one is from a customer's perspective, earlier he was paying between 5 and 7% across various cities, and now suddenly that has become 12%. And the thought process was that the input credit will be good enough so that the cost reduces for us. So when we did the complete analysis, when all the rates were out, we saw that the benefit that can come is maximum between 0.5% and 1%. Whereas the increase in the price to the end customer is it's an increase by 6%. So that clearly was a dampener from a customer's perspective. And what has also happened in this is that the investor community has completely evaporated from the from this industry.
Right, because of the under construction
one of the
flats
reasons for 35. Yeah, because the under construction flats were completely not selling at all. I agree with Anuj. So people are waiting for the OC, and how many OC ready properties will actually be available? Because in the earlier regime, most of them would have already got sold. So that is where the dichotomy was. I mean, even I am a great fan of the GST, demonetization, etc. But when it came to the actual reality and how the customer perceived it, there was a lot of confusion in the market. There were contrary reports in the market. All of this created that let's wait for clarity there. Some of the developers, even during the regime, started sending emails saying that I will not charge you GST at all. And there were some people who said that I will charge you 50% GST. So people are now waiting for the base price correction between developers. And they are also saying that, okay, I may get a GST rebate from the developer himself, depending upon how starving he is for sale.
All right. And it's not, so we are back.
Walk-ins.
But the conversions are not happening. You're also sticking to the story.
Lot of walk-ins, but not conversions happening.
Okay, not conversions happening. So there is a reason to do this debate. Okay. I'm not able to understand, though. I mean, there was service tax and VAT, which across most states added up to 10.5 to 11%, or if not, then with land abatement of 30%, that 12% GST doesn't seem totally out of whack. But I guess now that the math has settled on GST, it is beginning to pinch. And the valid question that for under construction properties, if you really want to revive demand, you cannot have a separate tax treatment than you have for ready to move in properties, isn't it, Sudhir?
I think that's correct. I think today there is a tax arbitrage issue. In the cost that a buyer has to pay for an under construction flat, which is much higher than what he would pay for a ready-to-move-in flat. But Manisha, that said, I think there are more steps that could be sort of looked at.
Okay.
To sort of...
I'll come to that. I will get your wish list as well. The carpet area Pandora box, which is always under discussion, right? Now for CLSS, right, credit-linked subsidy scheme, the carpet area has actually been rejected. Isn't it? Now you've actually increased it to 150 square meters. Yeah. Even then, demand's not taking off. I mean, I should be asking you and then Anuj this question. The industry keeps saying, do away with 30 and 60 square meters. But here you have a sitting duck increase in carpet area for CLSS, basically aimed at reviving middle income housing demand. And the government had to extend the period by 1.5 years to make sure that it's absorbed.
Well, I think we'll have to wait for the budget to see how much is the final allocation that the government actually makes towards CLSS. Last in November, we heard that the allocation was about 6,000 crores a year, right? So if you do the math, I think the average subsidy per person is about 2.3 lakh, right? So this tells you that about 2.5 lakh unique people would have taken the subsidy this year, which is not an insignificant number.
Okay.
Right? So I would assume that there is a case for pushing this further and getting even more people to sort of sign up under the CLSS scheme. But I think the progress has been reasonably good.
Progress has been good. What else? I did, of course, cut in between. What else do you think can be done to bring the demand
So
back?
I think there is a case to reduce the cost of transactions. So if you see markets outside India, registration costs and stamp duty, for instance, ranges between 2% to about 4.5%. Of course, there are a few emerging economies where the registration and stamp duties are like ours, but in more markets than otherwise, they are much lower. Right, so I think there is a case that these registration and stamp duties in most state governments, they become a source of revenue for the government. I'm not necessarily sure how good a thing that is. So to bring those down and encourage people to transact more. That said, there is
Will it? Okay, this is a thought, and I'm going to toss this to Anuj. Anuj, I know the entire industry is asking for a reduction in stamp duty. I have heard, though it may not be widespread, but there are certain areas where actual transaction prices or per square foot price of a particular apartment is lower than the circle rate of that particular apartment. People still have to pay stamp duty, but really, I mean, will people start buying if you bring down the stamp duty? Is that a big hangover that people have in their buying decision?
I think there are several things, Manisha, that will need to be done to get in the demand and the confidence back in the people. One of them is this financial, whether it is the GST, whether it is bringing down the stamp duty, whether it is rationalization of further prices. I think that is the financial. Then it is the sentimental reason, and then one more reason that I do want to discuss with you is the confidence. But just on the financial, I wanted to pick up the previous point that you said on GST. It should not happen that in the bid to bring the arbitrage at an equilibrium level, the finance minister decides to put in GST on the completed stock.
We better be careful of what we are saying, Asking for more GST breaks is going to be bothersome. Yeah. All right, go ahead.
Yeah. So that is one. The second is really from, you picked up the carpet area and whether, it was going to be able to bring in the stimulus by 150 square meters and bringing it up to that level. I think in the Prime Minister Awas Yojana, if you were to enhance it, 250 square meters for tier 2 towns, you would see is that there are financial and physical benefits that will be provided to both the buyers and the developers would enhance. And that, to my mind, will be another way to financially incentivize the home buyers. Today at 30 and 60 square meters, where the financial and physical benefits in PMAY is being given, I think that area needs to be enhanced to 90 square meters and 150 square meters for tier 1 and tier 2.
I get that, Anuj, and my only, why I feel that may not help much is because for the MIG scheme, right, under PMAY, where 1,000 crores was allotted, the carpet area was increased from 90 to 120 and 110 to 150. Yet that 1,000 crore of subsidy could not be disbursed. If it didn't have enough takers in middle income group, what is to say that it will have enough for the lower income and economically weaker group? I mean, the cost of houses also increases with the carpet area. But it's a good point made. I think we have to move on, and 2018 could also be the year of interest rates starting to creep up and harden. Now, how do you counter that? You just had a lovely golden period with prices not going up for 3.5 years, in some cases for 4 years. And you also had interest rates falling to 8.5% in home loans, lower if you were a first-time home buyer. You had subsidy included in that. So how can you now bring demand back, especially if you might lose that golden advantage? We'll come back and talk about that. Srini, I'm going to come to you. Right before the break, we talked about the fact that that big advantage of interest rates really falling or being on the downward curve has halted for this year, at least for now. how do you then ensure that affordability remains? What are the kind of tax breaks, which is totally under the purview of this budget, can be looked at?
No, as we spoke in this discussion itself, one is the GST. I think GST can bring a lot of, it can reduce the cost significantly. On the other hand, as you rightly said, the interest rates may remain stable or it may actually go up. But that can get compensated with the stamp duty reduction. Plus, if you look at the market, 80% of the stocks are selling under subvention. So the customer actually does not bother until the possession is coming, what is the rate of interest that is happening. So I don't think that will have an impact. What is likely to have an impact is the sentiments that needs to come back and say that, okay, all these measures which were primarily 3 or 4, demonetization, GST, RERA, Benami Act, all of them have settled. This is the rock bottom price that a customer can get so that he stops shopping around and comes and buys the apartment that he likes from a developer.
That is the finance minister's speech for sure. He's not going to do the selling for builders for sure.
No, I'm sure. I'm sure he need not do the selling for the builder, but somewhere, Manisha, you can do the selling for the builder. All news that we hear is developer being arrested or developer doing some scam.
Okay.
There are positive news also. Every day there are homes which are getting delivered as well.
Right.
So somewhere we need to get the sentiments back into the market, and the finance minister what he can do is reduce the stamp duty and GST, or bring both of them into the net. And what has RERA done to stamp duty? You had a question for Anuj, is that by the time 10% of the payment is paid, he has to actually pay the stamp duty. Which is why you see new schemes coming where from the customer you take only 1%. And the balance money is paid by him towards stamp duty.
Okay.
So let us align this in a manner where it is easy on the pocket for the customer as well. That definitely the finance minister can bring it on the table.
All right. I'm going to read out a bit of the Deloitte India list, because tax-specific house loss set-off limit of rupees 2 lakh should be increased. They've also said that additional deduction for pre-construction interest is, now in a post-RERA regime, we may not see delays, but there are so many stuck buyers who are also struggling with houses which haven't got, given to them, and they're paying EMIs and not getting any tax benefits. Deloitte's also said delay in construction of property tax benefit should get narrowed down for the buyer. An incentive for first-time home buyers, Section 80E of the Act, should give an additional deduction of 50,000 as well for FTHB or first-time home buyers. Sudhir, would you agree? GST, I don't know. This may not be, it's not part of the budget speech for sure. I doubt it. Stamp duty, I doubt if he will touch it right after GST, where it's an important part of the exchequer. What he can do is some of these simple tax changes, isn't it?
I would agree. I think the government has been in active management of the real estate industry even outside of budget, and we've seen that over the last 1 year. So there's a lot which has happened outside budget, So GST discussions outside the budget. They've done RERA, demonetization, and a slew of other measures, including affordable outside budget. So I think from a budget perspective, it'll be fair to expect the changes that you mentioned. I think tax breaks for the consumer to buy his first home or to even upgrade his home to a larger home are
that can
well
easily
deserved.
be extended. That can easily be extended. They just said up to March 2017, but they could have extended that very easily.
Plus, I think the quantum of
tax benefits
can be taken up, because I think houses cost a lot more compared to earlier, and the extent of benefit
it's been stuck at 2 lakhs for some time now, for more than 2 years, right? The tax deduction limit as well.
That's right.
So that, I think, is a sitting duck. Okay, Anuj, would you like to wrap out for us in terms of the tax breaks which can really help, and do they really help in bringing the buyer back? Is it something which influences his purchase decision at all?
So Manisha, I have a little bit of different take other than the tax break. I do feel is that the confidence needs to come in, and certainly in the NCR region, Manisha, that confidence is lacking. So there is a requirement perhaps of 80,000 crores to complete the incomplete units. You just now said is there are buyers who are stuck. I think the finance ministry should really look at it, that can they create a pool can they create some kind of a fund? You know, it's 70-80,000 crores that is required to complete some of these incomplete units, which I don't know how they're going to ever get completed. I mean, there are some of those names which media has propagated, where we know that those units are unlikely to get completed. That, to my mind, Manisha, is really causing a lot of grief in the confidence and the minds of the buyers, saying is that, you know, how do I know that if I actually go ahead and do this, whether the developer is going to be able to complete it or not, given that in NCR,
I agree,
particularly
Anuj.
Noida,
We've run out of time, Anuj, but I completely agree with you that, you know, some way has to be found to resolve the non-delivered apartments, that crisis. If the figure is 80,000 crore rupees, how does it come in? How does a pool get created? Probably that alone, completion of all the stuck flats, will bring back that confidence which is missing. Gentlemen, I'm going to thank you on that note. Sudhir Pai, Anuj Puri and Srinivasan Gopalan. Pleasure to have you, gentlemen. I don't know how many of these really fall in the purview of the union budget, but definitely lot has been done outside of the union budget. This is just a conversation that what can be done to bring back the demand. And if you look at the figures, 13% of the young and growing population is going to shift to urban areas by 2030. They will all need a roof over their head, whether they rent it or they own it. Now, 13% of India's population is a big number. It's 150 million. Only 7 countries in the world have a higher population than that. So we'll sign off on a positive note that housing demand has to come back sooner than later, and hopefully everything will align and we'll get some bonanzas on 1st February. Thank you very much for watching.